They said he was overhyped, overexposed, overconfident, a fifth-round pick riding a famous last name with more cameras than credentials. Analysts questioned his maturity. Coaches hesitated. Commentators mocked his posture, his voice, even his draft slot. But here's the twist. Nearly every one of them has had to walk something back. Here's every Shedeur Sanders hater explained in 30 minutes. Jason Whitlock did not whisper his criticism of Shedeur Sanders. He amplified it. Over and over again, he framed Sanders not as an emerging young quarterback navigating the brutal transition from college to the NFL, but as a media creation, a myth inflated by celebrity culture, hype, and the gravitational pull of his father's brand. In Whitlock's telling, the attention surrounding a fifth-round pick, taken 144th overall, was not organic. It was manufactured. It was clickbait. It was proof, he argued, that sports media had abandoned substance in favor of spectacle. Whitlock's core argument was simple but sharp. How could a third-string quarterback on a struggling Cleveland team dominate headlines during a competitive NFL season? Why were debate shows, viral clips, and social feeds revolving around a developmental prospect instead of playoff contenders? He pointed to the absurdity of analysts going viral for attacking Sanders. He suggested that the league's spotlight had been hijacked by hype, not performance. The implication was clear. If Sanders were not Deion's son, no one would care. But here is where the narrative began to fracture. Because whether critics liked it or not, attention is measurable. Engagement is measurable. And Sanders generated both at a level unusual for a day 3 draft pick. Brown's content featuring him consistently outperformed routine game coverage online. Jersey interest surged. Ticket resale chatter spiked when his potential appearances were rumored. Social clips of his preseason reps traveled far beyond the typical reach of a backup quarterback. Even his critics, including Whitlock, fueled the cycle they condemned. Every segment dismissing him became another distribution channel. On the field, Sanders has done what young quarterbacks are required to do: prepare, improve, and wait. Coaches have praised his composure. Teammates have noted his work ethic. The same media ecosystem accused of exaggerating his importance has had to acknowledge incremental progress in camp and limited action. Whitlock argued that Sanders was overshadowing the league. The numbers suggest something different, that Sanders tapped into an audience the league was not fully capturing, and in doing so, he has already begun proving that the so-called myth has very real market value. Dan Orlovsky.
I think one...
So what was your reaction to what we saw yesterday?
I actually don't think there is a time and place to act like that as a quarterback. I think one, everything that you do when you're a quarterback, I don't care if you're first, second, or third, is a job interview. In that league, every single thing you do. And my question to Shedeur would be, are you helping yourself in your own building? Did that 30 or 40 seconds help you in your own building when it comes to what they think you can be in the future? And then did you help yourself outside of your own building?
If Jason Whitlock attacked the aura, Dan Orlovsky went after the mechanics. Dan Orlovsky's criticism of Shedeur Sanders was never reckless or emotional. It was technical, measured, and rooted in evaluation. He questioned whether Sanders was demanding enough when it came to reps with first and second team units. He wondered if the praise coming out of camp translated to real command against stronger competition. He had also been direct during the draft process, pointing out what he believed were athletic limitations, describing Sanders as more average than elite in terms of high-end physical traits. Orlovsky's tone was analytical rather than dismissive. He made it clear that development matters more than hype. When reports surfaced that Sanders was shining in camp, Orlovsky essentially said, "Show it against the best defenders. Prove it in game speed. Prove that the comfort people talk about holds up when the bullets are live." Then came the shift. When Sanders finally stepped into meaningful reps, Orlovsky publicly acknowledged what he saw. He pointed to Sanders' poise, the way he played fast without rushing himself, how he avoided panic, how he looked in control of protections and timing. He even highlighted the very area he once criticized: mobility. Sanders extended plays, made smart decisions outside the pocket, and showed functional athleticism that translated in real situations. What matters most is this: Sanders did not respond to skepticism with theatrics. He responded with execution. In practices and preseason opportunities, he has consistently looked composed, accurate, and efficient. Coaches have trusted him in structured situations. Teammates have responded to his command in the huddle. Orlovsky asked for proof. Sanders began supplying it. not through noise, but through control, preparation, and tangible performance. Tony Grossi.
He's got the fewest reps in camp, and he's got a sore arm. Why? Well, people say he throws a lot before practice and after practice. Well, how counterproductive is that?
I'm sure there's a method to the madness.
What is it?
He's trying to get his arm right, Tone. I'm sure he's probably practiced more now than he has at any point in his collegiate
obviously
career.
was counterproductive because he's got a sore arm.
Okay, so you're using that as a negative against the kid?
I don't understand.
Jesus, God, would you give him a chance?
Well,
Tony Grossi has been one of the loudest and most scrutinizing voices when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. From the very start of training camp, Grossi openly questioned Sanders' readiness, often comparing him unfavorably to Dillon Gabriel, labeling Gabriel as the more polished, reliable option. Grossi leaned heavily on narratives about Sanders' sore arm and what he described as inconsistency in practice, suggesting that any flashes of talent could be excuses for injuries or limited reps. His critiques weren't just casual observations, they carried weight because of his platform covering the Browns and his ability to shape local fan perception. During the early stages of camp and preseason, Grossi wasn't shy about voicing frustration. On radio segments and social media threads, he highlighted mistakes in Sanders' mechanics, questioned his decision-making under pressure, and repeatedly framed his draft position, 5th round, pick 144, as evidence that the NFL did not see him as a true top-tier quarterback. This tone reinforced skepticism among Browns fans and the broader NFL audience, positioning Sanders as a media-driven storyline rather than a serious contender for the starting job. Yet the narrative began to shift as Sanders took to the field. He showed consistency, poise, and leadership that transcended the small sample size of preseason snaps. He executed reads effectively, maintained composure under pressure, and demonstrated both arm strength and mobility, negating the sore arm narrative. As the training camp progressed, his command over first and second team reps became undeniable. Performance metrics and game-like reps consistently favored him over alternatives, including Dillon Gabriel. By the time the Browns named Sanders QB1, the same Tony Grossi who had doubted him publicly did a full pivot. He openly acknowledged Sanders' work ethic, preparation, and on-field performance. On air, he admitted that the earlier skepticism was misplaced and praised Sanders for earning the starting role through tangible results rather than hype. Grossi's reversal wasn't just commentary, it was a clear public recognition that Sanders had proven the critics wrong. Shedeur Sanders' rise from draft skepticism to QB1 status is a textbook case of talent, preparation, and resilience overpowering narrative doubt. Critics like Tony Grossi were forced to confront facts. Sanders' performance silenced doubt, transformed perception, and firmly established him as the leader of the Browns' offense. Dillon Gabriel.
You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors, and I totally understand that. And my job is to compete, and that's what I'm focused on doing. Of course, we're doing this mid-game, but you know, it's something that I'll get used to, and just want to be the best team that I can and create an environment where we can all go do our best.
Dillon Gabriel, once seen as a quiet competitor and rising talent, didn't hold back when assessing Shedeur Sanders. Early in the Browns' offseason chatter, he subtly threw a jab, framing Sanders as more of an entertainer than a pure competitor. In interviews and offhand comments, Gabriel suggested that Sanders' media presence and public persona might overshadow his ability to perform under the rigorous demands of professional football. It was a pointed distinction, the implication being that Sanders excelled at the spotlight, but the true grind of quarterbacking in the NFL required a different level of focus and competitiveness. Gabriel's remarks carried weight because they weren't just casual criticism. They came from someone competing for the same roster spots and working within the same offensive system. Analysts and fans latched onto the narrative, debating whether Sanders' high-profile upbringing and celebrity-driven hype would hinder his development compared to quarterbacks like Gabriel, who were seen as steady and process-driven. Gabriel's framing tapped into the broader skepticism surrounding Sanders, especially given his draft position and the expectations attached to being Deion Sanders' son. However, the story began to pivot dramatically once Shedeur stepped onto the practice field and into preseason matchups. Sanders demonstrated the very traits that Gabriel implied might be missing: focus, competitiveness, and a clear understanding of timing, reads, and defensive schemes. Observers noted Sanders' poise in executing plays against first and second team defenses, his ability to extend plays with smart mobility, and his calm demeanor under pressure. Far from being distracted by the spotlight, Sanders used the attention to fuel performance, showing leadership and precision that drew praise from coaches, teammates, and analysts alike. As practices progressed, Sanders' performance consistently outshone expectations. He wasn't just holding his own, he was asserting himself as the quarterback to watch, proving that his competitive instincts matched or exceeded anyone on the roster. The entertainer versus competitor narrative unraveled as Sanders' results became undeniable. Clean mechanics, smart decision-making, and on-field leadership that inspired confidence. In short, Dillon Gabriel's subtle critique was met head-on with action. Shedeur Sanders transformed speculation into evidence, proving that he can thrive both in the media spotlight and under the intense demands of NFL competition, leaving critics and doubters reassessing their assumptions about the young quarterback's talent and resolve. Rex Ryan.
Something's missing with this kid. This kid talks. He runs his mouth like I could be a starting quarterback with his arms crossed like this. Get your ass in the front row and study and do all that. If I know, the whole league knows. Quit being an embarrassment that way. You got the talent to be the quarterback. You should be. You should be embarrassed that you're not the quarterback now.
If Dillon Gabriel's hesitation felt procedural, Rex Ryan's criticism felt personal. On national television, Ryan did not tiptoe around Shedeur Sanders. He questioned his demeanor. He questioned his body language. He questioned whether something was missing. Ryan suggested that Sanders carried himself like a starter without having earned it, implying that confidence without immediate elevation bordered on arrogance. He publicly wondered why Stefanski was not starting him, then pivoted to insinuating that perhaps there was a deeper issue holding him back. Ryan's delivery was classic Rex. Blunt, confrontational, animated. He challenged Sanders' posture, mocked the optics of arms crossed on the sideline, and essentially told him to stop talking and start proving. The underlying accusation was that Sanders projected entitlement instead of urgency. In Ryan's framing, a young quarterback not yet named the starter should be visibly grinding, visibly deferential, visibly desperate. Anything less became suspect. That critique quickly circulated. Debate shows replayed it. Social media amplified it. The suggestion that Sanders might be more image than substance fed directly into pre-existing narratives about hype versus production. But football has a way of cutting through commentary. When Sanders finally received extended, meaningful snaps, the conversation shifted from posture to performance. He delivered one of the most composed and efficient outings the team had seen that season. Timing routes were sharp, reads were decisive, protection adjustments were communicated clearly. He operated within the structure while showing the mobility to escape pressure when needed. Most importantly, he protected the football and sustained drives. The "something's missing" narrative collapsed under evidence. What Ryan questioned, poise, urgency, leadership, showed up on film. Sanders did not look rattled. He did not look overwhelmed. He did not look distracted. He looked prepared. Teammates responded. Coaches acknowledged command. Analysts who once questioned his readiness began highlighting his anticipation and calm under pressure. The same spotlight that magnified Ryan's criticism now magnified Sanders' execution. Ryan had said Sanders should be embarrassed not to be the quarterback. Instead, Sanders forced the issue through performance. He did not respond verbally. He responded with a game that reset the conversation. In professional football, narratives can linger until results intervene. Sanders' performance did exactly that. It reframed him not as a sideline personality, but as the most effective option under center. Criticism demands proof. Sanders provided it, and once the film spoke, the noise faded. Todd McShay.
He has a lot of maturing to do, Urban. I really do. I think both as an individual and as a quarterback and learning to play within the scheme. I think there's a lot of drifting and sliding out of the pocket. I think there's this innate, because of the way he played at Colorado and throughout his college career, there's this kind of like hero brand of quarterback that he likes to play where every play has to be a home run and he's got to run around and do all those things. I think I always called him coming out.
If Rex Ryan questioned Shedeur Sanders' posture, Todd McShay questioned his polish. Throughout the draft process, McShay's evaluation centered on maturity and tendencies. He suggested that Sanders had a lot of maturing to do, pointing to habits on film that concerned scouts. McShay highlighted moments where Sanders held the ball too long, relied heavily on structure-breaking plays, or absorbed unnecessary hits rather than throwing the ball away. He framed these not as fatal flaws, but as warning signs, bad tendencies that can be exposed at the professional level. His delivery was not emotional, it was clinical. McShay spoke in the language of scouting rooms, decision speed, pocket discipline, risk management. The underlying message was that Sanders' confidence sometimes drifted into overconfidence, and that the NFL punishes quarterbacks who fail to adjust. When Sanders slid in the draft, McShay's prior critiques resurfaced as part of the explanation. But once Sanders entered the league environment, something notable happened. The very maturity that McShay questioned began to show, not in social media posts or marketing campaigns, but in interviews and conduct. Sanders answered difficult questions without deflection. When asked about his draft fall, he avoided bitterness. When asked about competition in the quarterback room, he avoided controversy. It is about adjustment, and Sanders adjusted. McShay questioned whether Sanders had growing up to do within the professional structure of football. What unfolded instead was visible growth in real time. The quarterback who was labeled as carrying risky tendencies began displaying calculated restraint. The player who was described as needing maturity began conducting himself with composure in press conferences and competitive situations alike. Evaluation is projection. Performance is evidence. Todd McShay projected development was required. Shedeur Sanders delivered development on schedule, and in doing so, continued dismantling the narratives that once defined him. Colin Cowherd.
Is the league easy? Because I always said high school to college wasn't a big transition. When college to the league, I was like, okay, these boys playing.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it was that big a jump for you.
Yeah. You know, it's like, that's the kind of question like everybody been asking me. You know, I don't want to like, because the league is very hard in its own way. Like, you know, as former, NFL players, I know like what the league is capable of, like the mental aspect of it. But for me, I think the league was just like way more, like it's a physical game. Like from college to the NFL, like dudes really out there hunting. Like, you know, you got dudes like DeMarcus Lawrence. Like.
Meanwhile, Colin Cowherd did what he has built his career on doing. He evaluated the situation bluntly and publicly. When Shedeur Sanders slid to the 5th round of the NFL draft, Cowherd did not frame it as a mystery. He framed it as a message. On his show, he broke down the reasons he believed teams hesitated, questioning whether the surrounding media spotlight, the high-profile brand, and the constant attention created concerns inside front offices. He suggested that sometimes the noise around a quarterback can become part of the scouting report. Cowherd's tone was analytical but firm. He emphasized that the NFL is not sentimental and does not draft based on celebrity. As reps increased, so did the belief that his fall had more to do with perception than production. Cowherd himself later recalibrated. After seeing Sanders' poise and steady growth, he acknowledged that the quarterback's mental makeup and resilience were rare. He described Sanders as legendary in terms of composure and confidence, a recognition that the same spotlight once viewed as a liability might actually be a competitive advantage. Most importantly, Sanders did not argue with the draft narrative. He outperformed it. By earning trust in the locker room, executing efficiently in live situations, and positioning himself as the most effective quarterback in the room, he reframed the conversation entirely. The draft slot became irrelevant. Performance became central. Cowherd questioned why he fell. Sanders answered by rising, methodically, professionally, and convincingly. Kevin Stefanski.
Why wouldn't you, just to see if it does anything to the offense, give him an opportunity to go in there and play?
Yeah, obviously my focus is where we are right now, Mary Kay. That's not my focus.
Okay.
If Colin Cowherd questioned the draft fall and later adjusted his stance, Kevin Stefanski represented something more consequential: control. As head coach, Stefanski did not just analyze Shedeur Sanders. He determined when and if Sanders would step onto the field. From the beginning, Stefanski's tone was cautious, almost restrained. In press conferences, he repeatedly emphasized patience. He described Sanders as developing. He referenced the learning curve. He stressed system mastery and situational readiness. Each time the conversation drifted towards starting opportunities, Stefanski pivoted to process. The message was consistent: Sanders was not ready. Even as training camp reports highlighted Sanders' sharp practices and command in competitive periods, the starting nod did not come easily. Stefanski continued rotating reps. He maintained veteran preference in certain drills. He downplayed outside excitement. To some observers, it felt like institutional resistance. To others, it was standard NFL conservatism, but the perception among Sanders supporters was clear. The door was not opening despite performance. The narrative began to shift, not because of hype, but because of consistency. Teammates spoke about leadership. Coaches acknowledged command in the huddle. Analysts pointed out his timing and anticipation. Eventually, performance made hesitation unsustainable. When Shedeur Sanders was officially named QB1, it was not framed as a publicity move. It was framed as merit. Stefanski publicly praised his growth, preparation, and grasp of the offense. The same coach who had urged patience now emphasized readiness. What changed was not politics. It was proof. Sanders' rise forced acknowledgement. He did not campaign for the job. He outperformed it. In doing so, he closed the loop on months of doubt, from analysts questioning his draft slot to coaches questioning his readiness. Being named QB1 was not symbolic. It was confirmation that sustained execution overrides skepticism. And in the most competitive position in professional sports, that is the only argument that matters.